Hello, everybody. This is the fourth prep drop that we've made in our Prepping for NSDA National series. Today, we are shifting from case making to writing blocks. So just a few overall notes. First, these are, as you might say, painted, so definitely recut the cards a little bit. They aren't highlighted most efficiently, so be aware that their full potential might not be extracted, and you may run out of time. To remedy this, you should A, read the cards yourself and recut them, so you A, gain better understanding, and B, you'll be more efficient. In addition to this, you can probably paraphrase them as long as you don't have an opponent that is keen to read paraphrasing. Second, make sure that they don't contradict your own case because some of these blocks could contradict yourself, and it's never a good look in front of lay judges to contradict your own narrative. Third, hopefully you've already started writing your own blocks. This alone is insufficient to win you rounds. These are general ideas and a place to start. They are also ways that can maybe change your perspective on the topic, but definitely do more than this if you want to go far at NSD Nationals. Lastly, many of the blocks may go through the same theme, so make sure that you are diversifying your responses so your opponents aren't grouping your narrative easily, and that makes their life a lot easier and yours a lot harder. Now, for these individual arguments, some highlights to note are first on this gridlock argument. There's a lot more warrants inside this Rottenberg evidence. This is just an example. You should definitely click into the article and find more. Now, this Allen evidence is actually citing the study that is above the Rottenberg evidence and talks about how in 50 something years of data, you can see here, it looks at data from 1947 to 2003, specifically examining executive orders, and it says that it is unlikely to provide a means to work around a gridlock political process. I think this is valuable. I think one way you can leverage this is that all their examples don't really matter because they're small picture and only look at isolated examples. But on the bigger scheme of things, executive orders don't necessarily bypass gridlock. The only thing I would caution against is the idea that this is from 2014 and maybe more recent presidential administrations can change how this functions. A lot of teams have read this emergencies argument. I think that you can handle this argument in two ways. The first is response, and the second is specific scenarios such as natural disasters or disease, such as COVID-19. So on the top shelf idea, this Goldstein evidence says that the president relies on Congress to provide them the authority to address emergencies. You can use this as an alt cause response, which is like even in a world without executive orders, the president would still be able to act on emergencies because Congress gives them statutory provisions. As well as US code. I think it says, yes, 130 statutory positions across the US code. Another way you can attack it is more so on an example level of COVID. You can say state action solves, right? This is an argument about federalism, which is that even without the federal government, states can make actions. And in fact, I think you can even make an argument about how the states are able to solve better because they're able to tailor their responses and maybe even turn this into offense by pointing out how federal action often hinders state action. Another way to attack a lot of arguments is just saying that it's a double-edged sword. While executive action is expedited action, whether or not that action is positive or negative really depends on who's in the Oval Office and is oftentimes subjective. Though do be careful, and if your judge doesn't seem receptive to criticizing certain political parties, maybe don't read some of these responses. For natural disasters, it's largely the same. This Herscher evidence is about the current administration hurting disaster relief efforts. This is about counterterror. This Marin evidence is again back to that alt cause idea, which is that there's other things that were passed, for example, in this case by Congress, um, that allow the president to do these things even without executive orders. You can also attack the idea that counterterror isn't great, it causes recruitment. This card is pretty good. Is an empiric of how terrorism spiked 75,000%, which can be very persuasive because it's a big number, kind of scary. These are all like just kind of back files. So there's definitely more that you can find on the wiki if you're so inclined to go down that route. The civil rights debate is interesting. So a few responses. One, it goes both ways, right? For every example of civil rights being advanced by executive orders, you can find the opposite, whether that be a Muslim ban or a travel ban, which judges might be more familiar with because it's something that recently happened. And this is a historical example from the 1940s when FDR used executive orders to intern Japanese Americans. This is the Muslim ban, as I just mentioned, or the Muslim ban is different than the travel ban that passed, I think this month, but it's kind of an earlier iteration of that. Okay. These cards are a bit of like Civil War history that specifically answer the Emancipation Proclamation. They say executive orders freed the slaves. This Guzello evidence is a book from someone who's pretty credible. They teach at Princeton, and what they say is that the only reason Lincoln was able to pass executive or free the slaves was not because of executive orders. It was because he was able to use war powers that were only granted to him because of the Civil War. Seeing as most of the time we aren't in a civil war, the president can't use war powers. Uh, I kind of put a note here, right? War powers are not the same as executive orders. If you think about it, they'll tell you like, well, slavery is outlawed right now, but you should point out that that's not because of Lincoln's executive order. It was because of the 14th Amendment, which is ratified by states and the Congress. So clearly, it is not executive orders alone. The idea that executive orders alone can ratify the Constitution probably isn't very effective. Now, if you're reading the civil rights argument and you're a little bit concerned right now, thinking that this can be really damning on your argument, you can probably read into some history about how the Emancipation Proclamation was the first step towards later action like the 14th Amendment. Climate change, again, it can go both ways. You probably shouldn't only look at the current presidential administration. You can also look to past ones. You can also make arguments about fossil fuel lobbyists that have always been there in the past. There's definitely past empirics of that. Again, this is an argument about states solving. This also makes an argument about how financial market forces, such as companies, will want to invest in what's cheap, and as a result, that keeps green transitions going anyways, independent of whether or not government action exists. These are also pretty generic on the internal link and impact level. Gun control. This one examines the role of courts and says that courts are able to strike down gun legislation. It also gives multiple examples. For example, in California, a law prohibiting the sale of assault rifles is banned, same in New York. It also is predictive of the future that new laws will face legal challenges and may not survive long. This is about how independently courts striking down these laws, these states may refuse to enforce them, and also cites multiple empirics such as Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Arizona, Kansas as well. The A2 neg will be coming really soon, so stay tuned and good luck at NSD Nationals.